right, welcome back. Hey, I haven't been able to say hey to you yet. Good morning. Happy Sunday. Good to see you. It feels a little cold outside. Oh, I'm so happy. So excited about it. It's always the worst when it's cold in the morning and then it becomes 102, you know? I read online that it shouldn't be allowed to do that once the vibe has been established, shouldn't be allowed to change. So, anyways, on that note, we are in the book of Ecclesiastes. We're calling it A Coffee with the Mad King, and today is our second coffee date with old King Solomon. We're going to sit down and kind of hear about how is it going. And so far, sounds like not very good, you know? So King Solomon's had a lot of interesting things to say. And so I'm going to recap really quick, but I want to let you know that, you know, in this Old Testament book, kind of the heart is what is the gospel in Ecclesiastes. And oftentimes it's looking where the gospel is lacking in kind of the ramblings of King Solomon as he's at the end of his life, and he has a lot of regrets, he has a lot of doubts, he's kind of being open and honest, kind of venting his spirit about what he has experienced, again, a key phrase in Ecclesiastes, under the sun. And we talked just very, very briefly to recap. We talked last Sunday that through most of the book, King Solomon talks kind of as a character that he calls the teacher, which is just kind of like the lessons of life and what it has felt to be in his position and to experience what he has experienced. And it's kind of like the alter ego to the young King Solomon that we met this summer in the book of Proverbs. That's why it's kind of a bit of a sequel to that series in the book of Proverbs. Again, the teacher, he's cynical, he's frustrated, he's kind of borderline schizophrenic, he's all over the place, he's incredibly frustrated with the life that he's lived and kind of where he feels God has been or hasn't been in this, again, experience of life under the sun. And a very key phrase that we will read over and over and over, I'll repeat it to you, we talked about this last Sunday, the word is meaningless in our English translations. The word is hevel, which it means like this vapor, this breath. It means that like all of life under the sun, all that we experience, like it's there and then it's gone. We talked last Sunday about whether it's just the passage of time or whether it's just the reality of death or just the reality that sometimes we can't perfectly fix the outcomes of life. He says over and over that life is meaningless. Again, some other translations say the word vanity, like it's all in vain. It's like buying cotton candy on a rainy day, you know? You buy it like, and you go and take your second bite and it's this small. You ever done that? No, I haven't either. It's just what I thought about all week long, trying to explain to you what it means. It's like cotton candy in the rain. It's just bam, it's gone. It's a vapor. It's, again, hevel. And so what we see in Ecclesiastes is this kind of horizontal view of life, this kind of humanistic, deterministic, fatalistic, mechanistic. There's a bunch of different ways you can look at it of just like, if this is all that there is, man, life is quite a joke. Life is quite what? Meaningless. And so over and over in the book of Ecclesiastes, we will point to the gospel and look up to have a vertical view of life. And you see it multiple times. Again, this kind of mad king all of a sudden will be like, man, God's the greatest and God's so good. Anyways, life is horrible. Like he just kind of goes back and forth between this horizontal view of what? Under the sun living or looking up to the Son, Jesus Christ, of having a vertical view. And last week we talked about that through the highs and lows of life, we often, as a signpost, have to look to that moment, but then look up and say, God, thank you for this gift. Or, like we'll talk about today, God, get me through this season. And so let's figure out kind of what Solomon has for us today at this second coffee opportunity. Again, if we can have fun together, I picture, this is the week 2 of us getting early morning coffee with King Solomon. And so we're still, like some of you, a little bit tired, a little bit groggy. It's okay, by the way, mid-sermon, if you want to go out and get some more coffee. This morning, because Dylan got me some Joe Bella's Velvet coffee, the Velvet Roast. I shared it with y'all, so you're welcome, because what's mine is yours and yours is mine. So that's Velvet Joe Bella's out there if you want to sneak some. Could you tell the difference? Or did it just taste like Folgers? You could, yeah? Normally it's Folgers. But anyways, Joe Bella's for you this morning. If you're a guest with us this morning, we have Joe Bella's every Sunday, and it's so good. And no, I'm just kidding. So this is what we read at this second coffee date. Again, it will be in Ecclesiastes chapter 3 today. Ecclesiastes 3 will be a much cheaper book. Ecclesiastes 3 will begin at verse 1. This is what we read. It says that there is say the word with me, time for everything. and a season for every activity under the heavens. Kind of a different way of saying under the sun, isn't it? He says there is a time for everything, and what we read next is the teacher does the math. What we're going to read is 28 different statements about life. These are kind of certain statements that the teacher wants us to know about different seasons and different times throughout our life. And what's interesting is we'll read 14 positive statements coupled with 14 negative statements about life. This is actually a very common kind of Jewish literary style. If you want to nerd out later and you can Google it, it's called antithetical parallelism, where these are two kind of conflicting statements, and the words don't rhyme in the original language or in English, but the emotions do, if that makes sense. So the teacher's going to do the math. He's going to say, okay, 14 positive moments, times of celebration, times of good things happening to us, followed by 14 negative times, negative seasons, negative experiences. And so he's basically going to say 14 minus 14 equals 0. So again, it's all hevel. What's the point? But I want us to spend some time with this and think about this before we move on. But here are some statements that I think all of us it can resonate with. The 14 plus 14, or rather minus 14 equals 0 when it comes to, again, the different times, the different seasons of our life. And just for fun, just to be silly, I did some of the math this week, and here's some random things throughout the average lifespan, how many hours on average we will spend in our entire lifetime on some very small, mundane, but apparently very cumbersome when it just comes to time spent in our lives. Throughout your entire life, the average person will spend 230,000 hours sleeping. Some of you got a little too much, and I can see, and some of you needed a little more this morning, I can see. 230,000 hours of your life on average is with what my dad used to say this after church on Sunday. He'd be like, sorry, I can't go out to lunch. I got a meeting with Sister Sheets and Pastor Pillow, and he'd go to sleep. It's stupid. So 200, you can steal that though. It's stupid, but steal it. So 230 hours of your life on average will be spent sleeping. Hours eating, 32,000 hours, much less. I'm a quick eater. I get hiccups. It drives my wife crazy. I don't have time to swallow food. I got the Lord's business to attend to. But yeah, I just, on average, 32,000 hours sleeping. On average, we will spend 12,000 hours cleaning the house. And my wife says, not your lifetime, honey. Shoot. Is that what's going on? I'm taking those hours. 1 hour would be great. So anyways, 12,000 hours on average cleaning the house. 38,000 hours driving, right? Probably not in a small town like this, but just driving there and back. On average, working 90,000 hours. On average, you will spend 5,000 hours of your life going to the bathroom. Male average is 10 times more than that. Am I right, ladies? How else are we supposed to respond to emails? And then just for fun, the last one, we will spend on average 20,000 hours online or on social media. We can all do a little less than that. That's the average. Again, he says, the teacher does the math. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the sun. Here again, 14 positive, 14 negative. Let's kind of read these statements together. We'll kind of read and pause and read and pause. It's going to be a lot of Ecclesiastes. He says this, there is a time to be born, and there is a time to die. On average, around 170,790 people a day will discover it is their time to pass away. And around 368,000 people will discover it is their time to be born every day. It says there is a time to what? You see how he starts so stark of a contrast? There is what? A time to be born. There's a time to die. He says there's a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to tear down, and a time to build. Let's talk about this really quick, just in case you're like, what? A time to kill, obviously that original Hebrew word is not like a time to murder, but we can think, obviously as, I don't know, an ancient Israelite, they would have wars. They would also kind of as a part of their sacrificial system, or for sustenance, they would kill animals, right? There's a time to kill and a time to heal. Also, I think it's interesting, just kind of in the fabric of who we are as God's creatures, the body kind of has this natural death cycle and rebirth cycle just when it comes to our cells. On average, the body will have 60 billion cells die every single day. Some of us are helping it along a little too much. That's what it does by itself without any of your help. But on average, about 60 billion cells die every day. But don't worry, about 330 billion cells will be born, will be created, will be replenished, renewed in your life. So there's kind of this, antithetical parallelism even in our bodies of a time to very different things. He says this, there's a time to weep and there's a time to laugh. There's a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them. I appreciate the fact, I don't know, maybe it's just a bit of how I'm wired or was unintentionally raised. I appreciate that King Solomon reminds us that there is a time to weep. There is a time to grieve. I think sometimes in kind of religious circles, we don't allow ourselves to grieve as if, one, God doesn't see what's going on in here, but almost as if we need to have so much faith that we're not allowed to weep, to be frustrated. I read multiple studies this week that talked about repressing grief, like physiologically, biologically can lead to cardiovascular disease, hypertension, even cancer, just trying to repress what there always is a time for. A time to weep and a time to laugh. Time to mourn, a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and to gather them. I also kind of love the hidden promise there that in the time of weeping, in the time of mourning, keep trusting, keep living, because the laughing and the dancing times will come again. There is a time, there is a season for everything. He says this, there's a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak. There's a time to love and a time, here's another interesting, there's a time to hate. There's a time to hate God, are you sure about that? Which, reminded me of Abraham Lincoln. He kind of writes I believe it's not an autobiography, but a biography. He told stories of when he was younger, he saw in New Orleans a slave block for the very first time. And he wrote that there was a hatred that welled up inside of him of what men was capable of doing to men. There is a time to hate what? To hate sin, to hate what God hates, to hate injustice, to hate the wrong, the evil of this world. There's a time to hate, and of course also there's a time to love, a time for war and a time for peace. 28 declarative statements. This is what it feels like. This is what we will experience in the different seasons of life under the sun. Again, the teacher does the math. 14 minus 14 equals 0. And what we read here is this kind of real sharp turn. Because he's going to go from 28 certain declarative statements to a bunch of cynical existential questions. Now he will ask questions of God, of life, of us, of life again under the sun. So after all these statements, a time to here, a time to this, a time to that, he says, what do workers gain from all of their toil? I think he asks a question that I think many of us sometimes are too afraid to, like God, or God's gonna get in trouble at us. He goes, so then what's the stinking point of all this? Because when I laugh, I know there will be time to weep, and when I build, I know there will be a time where it gets destroyed. It's like, so what's the point of all of this? What do we even gain? Again, he says, so what do workers even gain from all of their effort and striving and toil? And if you think that's harsh, he gets even more existential. He's very honest at this coffee date this morning. And I think what we're going to see, if I can try and unpack a bit of what we see in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, I think that King Solomon is kind of jumping back and forth between two mountains. I'll call one Mount Cynic and the other Mount Certain. And so Mount Cynic is what? There's no point to any of this. Again, the humanistic, mechanistic, fatalistic, there's no purpose. There's nothing behind the curtain. There's no additional wall of it all. There's no truths to learn. There's no love really to be had. If it's all meaningless, then none of this matters. You don't matter. I don't matter. None of this matters. It's the cynical view. It's just there's no point. And I think on the other side, now hear me here, because to spoil my sermon, the sermon is not, so make sure you're on Mount Certain, because that can also be a wall in and of itself. Because I think on the other side is Mount Certain that is, hey, I have it all figured out. I got no more questions to ask, no more curiosity. This could be a person of faith, and also this could be a person that's an atheist, right? I'm certain about this, dogmatic about this. I am a fundamentalist atheist, right? No more curiosity, no more listening ears. I know all there is. I'm so smart. I have a perfect plan. I have a perfect scheme. And so I feel like King Solomon, and often many of us, are kind of caught between these two. And again, to kind of spoil a bit of the sermon, the point is not to stay on either of these, but to continue to trust God day after day and walk with him wherever he might have us. Because there are days where we wake up on Mount Certain just, I got it all. I got this. Put on some happy jams. I don't know why you dance like that, but I do apparently, Happy jams was music, but you could also put on happy pajamas. I don't know if you have that, but go buy some today, Everything's meaningless anyway, so go buy some happy jams. Be like, I'm feeling good today. I'm putting on my happy jams, right? I'm feeling great. Everything's amazing. Slept great. Look great. And then also there's the Mount Cynic of it all. Just like, what's the freaking point? Push snooze again, because life doesn't matter. Where is God? Is there a God? Is all of this work and all of this toil, all my blood, sweat, and tears, does it even amount to anything? Again, it's interesting that in Ecclesiastes 3, King Solomon kind of goes back and forth between these two mountains. And I gotta let you know, it's quite nauseating. It's this weird roller coaster that he's on, but also, and praise God for this, it's so familiar. It's so human. Of these ebb and flows, of these experiences, that is life under the sun. And so we often look to God and say, can you make sense of this? Because I sure can't. So again, let's go on this existential roller coaster with him. But I did something kind of interesting today. So there's some kind of clues, I think, along the way. How do we navigate between Mount Cynic and Mount Certain? I think because again, I told you last Sunday, this book doesn't really conclude very well, period. But it doesn't really conclude until the very last chapter. So we're caught in this unresolved chord that is the book of Ecclesiastes until the 12th chapter. But I do think in this we see some clues. And so what I did is on the slides, I highlighted certain phrases that I won't explain until the very end. So I don't know, I thought this would be kind of fun. So pay attention. There's a hidden mystery mid-sermon. If you can solve it, good for you. So there's kind of highlighted phrases that you'll see along the way. But again, we'll kind of backtrack at the end. We won't really stop to talk about them. So let's go. Let's see what he has to say. I don't know about you, but I need a second cup of coffee because this is already way too heavy for me, Solomon. He says this, Ecclesiastes 3, just the next verse, in verse 10, he says, I have seen the burden God has laid on the human race. Listen to how beautiful this is. I mean, again, it just kind of just back and forth. He says what? He's made everything beautiful in its time. Even the harsh things, even the tough seasons, even the most gut-wrenching experiences of your life. Well, I think that the New Testament promise of this is what? Romans 8:28, that he will work all things together. What happened wasn't good. What you're experiencing isn't good. But God can take even the most horrific of circumstances, all things together for our good. For those of us that love the Lord and are called according to his purposes. He says he's made everything beautiful in his time. He has also, listen to this, he's also set eternity into the human heart. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. I love this certainty here. He says God will make everything beautiful in its time. And he's also, there's this gnawing, there's this emptiness that all of us experience day after day after day. What is it? It is that God has set eternity into human hearts. So there's this restlessness under the sun. Like we learned last week, he said, I tried. You can't drown it out. With substances, sex, success, whatever, you can't drown it out. He says what? That he's set eternity in the hearts of humans. Yet no one can fully fathom what God has done from beginning to end. There's this restlessness that only finds its rest in God, right? Is that Kierkegaard? I don't know. That's not me. That's someone else. He set eternity into human hearts. So try as we might with anything, be it inventions or science or success, right? Even the good things that can just distract us from the God things. He says there's eternity in every single heart. And I think in the quiet of night, even the most staunch atheist would just go, yeah, there's something gnawing at me and I just can't see, right? Or even just an agnostic. Or even again, to go back to Mount Certain, even the most fundamentalist Christian that's just like, I have it all figured out, and I got no questions, and I got no doubts. There's still that gnawing. There's that eternity into human hearts. I read this week, it's a little sing-songy, but I do think it rings true. I read this week that science can add years to your life, but only God can add life to your years. Fullness of experience of how God has wired the universe to be and what does it mean to be his son and daughter. So I think a prayer for us today would be, hey, God, set eternity in my heart again. Help me not to ignore that. Help me not to try and drown it out or escape it or outlive it or outsmart it. Let me find my rest in you. Would you add life to my years? Because all of our years are numbered. We can't outlive that. So again, give us that eternal purpose again. He continues, he says this, I know that there's nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live. Kind of similar to what he talked about last Sunday, huh? That each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in their toil. This is the gift that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it. Nothing can be taken from it. God does it so people will fear him. Whatever is has already been done, and what will be has been before. And God will call to pass this account of God. Or God will call the past to account. Again, this is certain here. He says, hey, God's in control. His work alone will endure forever. All of human striving, eventually it will go away. He says, but God will call the past into account. Again, to reiterate, he says, so enjoy it. Enjoy this life. Enjoy this toil. Make all of it a signpost saying, God, thank you for this gift. But again, the series is Coffee with the Mad King. And so he takes another real sharp turn in the very next verse. And again, just for fun, I picture, him taking a phone call. He is a king. He would be how does he have time to have coffee with us every Sunday, right? I picture him getting a phone call, like, yeah, okay, we'll move that, we shift that, funds, and he's fired, she's hired, blah, blah, blah. He sits back down, like, everything good? And he just says, and I saw something else under the sun. In the place of judgment, wickedness was there. In the place of justice, wickedness was there. And I said to myself, God will bring into judgment both the righteous and the wicked. For there will be a time for every activity, a time to judge every deed. So what does he say? I saw something in this life under the sun, that where I expected justice, where I expected the right thing to be done, wickedness was there. Evil was rewarded. He says, I've seen it where justice never happened. Which begs the question of, God, where are you, and are you going to do something about this? He says, I saw evil men get away with horrible sins, and I saw innocent men have their lives torn apart by injustice. Again, he's going back and forth between Mount Cynic and Mount Certain. And what he has seen, which again is so human and so honest and so real, are these moments of, there was so much evil that seemed to be rewarded. There was so much injustice, and it looked like nothing was being done. Like evil just was able to take a victory lap, day after day, month after month, year after year. He said, I saw this under the sun. In the place of judgment, there was wickedness. And this is common, right? This is we see this in our society day after day. It's like, God, what are you going to make this right? There's so much sin. There's so much evil. There's so much corruption. And it just feels like that's just the day and age, not only that he was living in, that we live in. I think we've all had these moments. In the place of justice, I saw wickedness. I saw even the innocent kind of get destroyed by life of what? Evil people. So just for fun, So Pastor Skip Hertzig, he has this commentary on Ecclesiastes. And in this section, in Ecclesiastes 3, he tells this fun little retelling of Little Red Riding Hood. So he's like, we all know Little Red Riding Hood. So he was like, this is Little Red Riding Hood if it happened in our day and age, if it happened in our very corrupt society. So this is kind of funny, and it's also kind of not. And I'm just going to read exactly how he said it. You've heard the story, but you've never heard it this way. Once upon a time in a faraway country lived a little girl called, say it with me, Little Red Riding Hood. One day her mother asked her to take a basket of fruit to Grandma's house, who'd been ill, and she lived alone in a cottage. A wolf, lurking in the bushes, overheard the conversation and decided to take a shortcut to Grandmother's house and got the goodies for himself. The wolf killed Grandma, dressed in her nightgown, jumped into bed, and awaited the little girl. When she arrived, he tried to grab her, but the child ran screaming from the cottage. A woodcutter, working nearby, heard the cries and rushed to the rescue. He killed the wolf with his axe, thereby saving Red Riding Hood's life. All the townspeople hurried to the scene and proclaimed the woodcutter as a hero. But at the inquest, several facts emerged. One, the wolf had never been advised of his rights. The woodcutter made no warning swings before striking the fatal blow. The Civil Liberties Union stressed the point that although the act of eating Grandma may have been in bad taste, no pun intended, the wolf was only doing his wolf thing and thus didn't really deserve the death penalty. And so, it was decided there was no valid charges against the wolf. Therefore, the woodcutter was indicted for unaggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Several nights later, the woodcutter's cottage was burned to the ground, and a year afterwards, Grandma's cottage was made a shrine for the wolf who had bled and died there. I know it's stupid, but it kind of reiterates the point, right? That sometimes evil is celebrated and rewarded. Sometimes it's like, no, this is so, why didn't justice happen? And there's a million true crime documentaries that proves the point. Sometimes the system doesn't work, the system that we created. We're not perfect like God. And even Solomon, way, way, way back in the day, is saying, listen, where I wanted justice, all I got was wickedness. And so he's like, God, what are you doing in all of this? He's going back and forth. And so on Mount Cynic, he has set up shop, he has built a tent, he has found food and water. On Mount Cynic, this is Solomon's thought. He says this, so I said to myself, as for humans, God tests them so that they may see that they are like the animals. For surely the fate of human beings is like that of animals. The same fate awaits them both. As one dies, so dies the other. All have the same breath. Humans have no advantage over animals because what? Here it is again. Everything is meaningless. Now, this is fascinating. We actually see this a lot in Ecclesiastes. That what King Solomon, again, I told you, he's a bit of an unreliable narrator. And that random line in the video isn't so random. King Solomon needs Jesus. This is life under the sun. So what is he experiencing? After all this wickedness and injustice, he's saying, we don't matter. He's saying the animals and the humans, right? Like, biblically, this is not true. But in the Bible, King Solomon gets to fully vent his spirit. So just in case you're like, yeah, good word. That's why you got to read everything in context, right? Humans were given the what? The image of God, the imago Dei. Nothing else in creation. God's, not even the angels. We are given the imago Dei. Genesis shows us that we have authority and dominion over animals. We should never mistreat animals, of course. It's like, right? We should never mistreat them. Even in Matthew chapter 10, Jesus has that example of like a sparrow, which at the time wasn't a very beloved bird. He's like, no, but the Lord cares for them, and not a single one falls out of the sky until the Lord carefully, he knows that. But the whole point is, if God cares about the sparrows, how much more does he care about you? So again, what Solomon is saying here is theologically inaccurate. But when it comes to life under the sun, it sure rings true, doesn't it? Sometimes it feels like it's just that there's injustice. And so what he's saying, I said to myself, as for humans, God just wants us to know, like, we're no different in his eyes. He says this will continue. He says, all go to the same place. All come from dirt, and to dust all return. Who knows if the human spirit rises upward and if the spirit of the animal goes down into the earth? This is great, huh? It's like, I'm thankful that the Bible says this. He's like, who knows? Who knows? Right? When I die, am I going to God? I sure hope so. But he's like, I don't know. Maybe the birds go up there, right? This is just, he's fully venting his spirit, and I'm thankful for the honesty. He says, to dust we all return. And he says, so I saw that there was nothing better, here's that phrase again, for a person to enjoy their work, because that is their lot. And then here's this really interesting question where I'm like, oh, this is where it kind of unlocked for me, where I started looking back on all the crazy, depressing stuff that he's said to us so far. He says what? For who can bring them to see what will happen after them? Now the gospel goes, we know the answer to that question, and it's the finished work of Jesus Christ. He says, who can bring them to see what will happen? Now, I don't know if you guys, remember for this long, but I think what we're reading in Ecclesiastes chapter 3 is very much, if you guys were here for the spiritual cartography series, remember we talked about the wall, which is where our doubts or our fears, or we just get a fistful of life and we just go, I don't know, everything that I thought life was going to be has crumbled. And everything that I'd built my life on my faith in God, it feels like it's falling apart. And I believe that's what King Solomon is talking about right here. That just like, there were so many horrible experiences and I thought, God, what's the point? Or do you even care? Which again, I think is so honest. And I'm thankful that in our Holy Scriptures, there's this kind of language of, God, are you hearing it all? And again, the book resolves eventually. But I think even today, as King Solomon has kind of fully vented his spirit, I think we've seen some clues along the way to help navigate when life just feels like this, when there is a time and there is a season of, God, I don't know if you care. And God, I don't know if I'm special in your eyes. God, I don't know if you're good. I don't know if you're just, because this is what I'm seeing. And so there's been some, I don't know if you were paying attention, but there's been some clues along the way. And I think King Solomon is being very honest with us in a way that enables us to be honest with God and with one another. So there's been multiple I statements throughout Ecclesiastes chapter 3. As again, he goes from Mount Cynic to Mount Certain. What we've seen is this. He has said, I know. And he has said, I saw. And he has said, I said. And I think those three statements, you can tell that in his wrestling, in his searching, in his prayers, in his doubts, that God is up to something. And what King Solomon is refusing to do is to set up shop on either Mount Cynic or on Mount Certain. So again, he says, I know. And if you go back, you can read it. I know, which was what? The truths about God. I know God has placed. I know God will make everything beautiful in his time. These are the things that he's clinging to in the season of, I just don't know, but this is what I do know. And then he also said, what? I saw. These were his life experiences. I saw evil go unpunished. I saw, again, in the place of justice, there was wickedness. And I appreciate that there's space, I guess, to be able to talk this way in our Bibles with God and with one another. This is what I'm seeing. This is what I'm experiencing. And it's horrible. This time, this season is awful. And again, he said multiple times, I said, which is what? His emotions and his thoughts. I said to myself, I don't think God cares. And again, I think in Christian religious circles, we don't really give ourselves the space to talk that honestly with God and with one another. But I think as he's journeying through this life with God, I think these three things are really important. That he's saying, listen, this is how I'm feeling. So I'm speaking it out loud. I said, I'm having a really hard time. I'm really depressed. I'm really anxious, right? I have a setback and I just don't see God getting me through this. I'm angry at God. I'm frustrated at God. I doubt God, right? I said. And also these life experiences I saw. Like he's saying, I've seen crazy things, horrible things, gut-wrenching things, and they're eating me alive, so I need to verbalize this. This is what I've experienced. But I appreciate that he starts everything with, but at the end of the day, even though I think this way, even though I feel this way, even though I've lived this way or I've experienced these things, here's what I know. And I appreciate that he's kind of triaged everything that is going on in this very emotional roller coaster that is Ephesians chapter 3, again, because it's so familiar and it's so certain. So again, the purpose of all of this is not to set up shop on Mount Cynic and go, what's the point anyway? And it's also, I don't think the point is to find your way to Mount Certain and then don't ask any more questions. Just keep it all to yourself because you're safe there. I think what, as heavy as it is, I think King Solomon is opening for us a way to talk to one another and talk to God in a way that is honest and will lead to healing. Because I think he's showing us that, listen, we will always have days like Ecclesiastes 3, where it's like, man, it's been rough out there. And I have these feelings and these emotions and these thoughts, and they're eating me alive. That's right, that's kind of that Mount Cynic of it all. And also, I think he's reminding us that you will, none of us will ever be able to perfectly figure this out, this side of eternity. So don't fool yourself that you can just, again, set up shop on Mount Certain and say, I'm good. No more studying, no more learning, no more praying, I have it all figured out. Don't ask me to do nothing because I feel good and I feel safe right here. But what I want to do, again, to show you the gospel in Ecclesiastes, I want to take us now to 1 Corinthians. Because I love what we read that God says to the church in Corinth through the Apostle Paul. Because what he does is he speaks to our future state in eternity as a way of giving us perseverance and strength for our current struggles. This section here in 1 Corinthians feels a lot like Ecclesiastes. And he says this, the first three words are so incredibly meaningful. He says, love never fails. But where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. I hope this is comforting for you in a way that stirs up worship and surrender. In eternity, there will be no need for speaking in tongues or for prophecies. There'll be no need for sermons. I'll be out of a job. I'll be able to just hang with the rest of y'all, right? There will be no Bible commentaries or seminars, right? Retreats? No. Because there'll be no need to, tell me what God is like. No thanks, I'll just go ask him. You know what I mean? It's like, there'll be no need for this. Let's try and interpret what the will of God is. No, we're in his perfect will right now. There will come a day where what? Prophecies, where, what does it say? Where knowledge will pass away. I think it's fascinating that there will come a day in eternity where there will not be a need for answers. We'll have it all figured out with him. There won't be a need for knowledge, won't be a need for books and studying, right, and commentary. Now I'm having a hard time with but we'll continually learn. Yes, but hear me though. There'll be a time where all that will go away, but we'll always have a need for love. There'll be a day where prophecies and speaking and what? It says knowledge will pass away, but what? Love never fails. And he says this, what's the why? What a weird statement, Paul. He says this about our current state right now. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part, but when what? Completeness comes. I think the ESV says, but when the perfect comes, what is in part will disappear. For right now, we only see as a reflection in a mirror. But then we will see face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. Here's the thing that just gives me, all it does is just stir up surrender to the truth that I can't fully figure this out this side of eternity. But here are three things that he gives us. He doesn't fully give us all the answers, right? He doesn't fully peel back the curtain and go, here's what I'm doing for the next 10,000 years. Happy you asked. But what did he do? He says, I'll give you what? Faith and hope and love. And then here it is again. And the greatest of these is love. So through the ups and downs of the times and the seasons of life, when we feel like we are just stuck on Mount Cynic and we're just like, I don't know. I've experienced so much. and everything is just, it's eating me alive. Again, I don't think the answer, because Ecclesiastes, King Solomon goes, I tried to learn and study and grow in all of wisdom, but that even was vanity. But what is not? Faith in God, hope in his goodness, and his love in our lives and our love for others and of others. Again, I'll take you to this. Probably every Sunday we'll end with this idea, with this promise. The life under the sun is meaningless, but life under his sun is meaningful. Worship team, you can come on back. And I want to end with this very familiar story, if you've been here for a few years. One of my favorite stories in the New Testament. It's in Matthew chapter 17. I feel like God has brought me back to this story many, many times when I feel stuck. When I have this hesitancy to move into what is next or what is new or what is scary. And again, if we can picture setting up shop on Mount Cynic, there's no point, there's no God. It's all what? Humanistic, mechanistic, fatalistic. It's time to move off that mountain. Or over here on Mount Certain of I have all the answers. Me and God are good. I'm done asking questions. I'm safe. So don't ask me to step out in faith. Don't ask me to try something new. Don't ask me to move into a new opportunity. Don't ask me to try and rethink anything, even if it's a false idea about God. No, I'm good, I'm certain. I feel a lot of people are stuck there. And again, to play into it, sometimes even just atheists are stuck there on Mount Certain. I am certain there is no God. You sure about that? Again, faith, hope, and love. The greatest of these is love. So here's a story, one of my favorites. It's in Matthew chapter 17. It's the transfiguration of Jesus Christ. So Jesus takes Peter, James, and John up to a mountaintop, and there he is transfigured, right? He shows them a bit of his glory. And it's interesting that what it says in the New Testament is that when Jesus, his face is shining like the sun, and Moses and Elijah show up. It's like, yo, what a cool cameo, right? And oftentimes they say that Moses represented the Old Testament law and Elijah represented the Old Testament prophets. That's not explicit in the text, but clearly Jesus is after something. He wouldn't just have, oh, you guys are here too. No, he's showing the fulfillment, right? All that he had come to accomplish and fulfill. And what I appreciate, obviously the point of the passage is Jesus transfigured, face shining like the sun, but I can't get over Peter's reaction. Because Peter is just like, this is great. Can we stay here forever? As he's in the presence of Jesus, and they're up on this mountain. Again, it's Jesus, Peter, James, and John. And now, hello, Moses and Elijah. What Peter wants to do is, can we just stay right here? So it says this. Peter said to Jesus, Lord, it is good for us to be here. I don't know why I picture him whispering, but I picture him whispering because he leaves some people out. He goes, if you wish, I'll put up 3 shelters. One for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah, one, Peter, where are you sleeping? And also James and John, hello. He's just like, it's good. How about we just stay up here forever? Let's just ignore the rest of the world. It doesn't matter. This is so good. I feel so great right here in this moment. And you know what Jesus is going to say. What does he say? He doesn't go, great idea, Peter. I'll start the hamburgers. No. He says what? It says Jesus came and he touched them, and I feel today the Holy Spirit speaking to many of us. What does he say? He says, get up and don't be afraid. And if you keep reading in Matthew chapter 17, they go back down and they deal with demons and persecution. And I think so many of us, gosh, time and time again in my life, I wanted to stay. What first? Mount Cynic, stay in the hurt, stay in the pain, stay in the doubt. Because I've gotten so used to it, it feels warm for some reason. Stay in the unforgiveness. Stay, or maybe just stay in the apathy of not growing in my walk with Christ. Or again, much like Peter and many times in our life, which is it's so safe right here. Don't make me move. Don't make me step into uncertainty. Because if we just got to live on Mount Certain every single day, there would be no need for trust. There would be no need for daily obedience. There'd be no need for faith. And so in the highs and lows of life, just like King Solomon experiences, and he just what? Spilled it all out for us in Ecclesiastes chapter 3. I think the call is what? The faith, hope, and love of following Jesus every single day. So here's what I want to do. All of us walked into this service today in a certain time and in a certain season. And what I cannot offer you, and what none of us can offer you is, oh, here is a perfect plan of how it's all going to work out. You don't have to stress. You don't have to worry. But what we can offer is the faith, the hope, and the love that comes from all of us being there for one another and saying, let's continue to what? Get up and don't be afraid. Because I know that he is here, and I know that he is working, and I know that he is able. So what we're going to do, the worship team is going to continue to lead us with some songs. But I want us to have some time together to pray for one another. And I've kind of secretly asked some people from every section to be available for prayer. If you were one of those that were called upon, you just raise your hand. Raise your hand. Looks like some of them didn't show up. That's funny. I'll be there, Pastor. Never mind. So that's okay. I'll take this section. But here's what we're going to do. Sorry, raise your hand again. Yeah, okay. A little more than I expected. All right. Thank you. So if you need prayer this morning, you saw their hands raised. You can go to them. But also, what I want us to get more and more comfortable with is just praying together. Like, I'm here. I want to pray. But I kind of hate the bottleneck that is, I need prayer, so I need to go to the pastor. Listen, same God, same Holy Spirit, right there in every single seat. So I want us to spend some time praying for one another, praying for the needs that are around this room. Whatever time, whatever season you're in right now, we could ask God to move, ask God to show himself, ask that the faith in God would be restored, and that hope would be stirred, and that you would experience his love and the love from others today. And again, the answer is not to set up shop anywhere, but to keep trusting him day after day after day, for he is good, and his love endures forever. So would you stand with me? And let's do exactly that. Let's linger for a while, and let's spend time praying. If the season you're at right now is like, man, I'm great, awesome, then you're officially on the prayer team today. Thanks for being here. But yeah, if you're struggling, let's do this. I'm gonna close this out. I've already asked the people that are available for prayer to raise your hand. Would you be so bold as this? If the time of the season you're in right now is difficult, if you feel like you're stuck and I don't know where to go, I'm having a really hard time, I want you to be bold enough, brave enough to raise your hand right now. I need prayer today. Keep them up. I appreciate your boldness. Keep your hand up. Okay, everyone else, look around there. Start there. I want to ask God to move powerfully. Thank you so much for raising your hands. You can put them down. Let's spend time in his presence, praying together. Let's be there for each other. Again, in the power of the faith, hope, and love of Jesus Christ. Let me pray over us, and then let's worship and pray together. God, I pray that you would show yourself strong today, that we could experience your healing, experience your provision. You would give us strength and perseverance for the day ahead, knowing that there will be good days and bad days. There'll be incredible days of celebration. There'll be days of mourning and weeping. There'll be days of strength and certainty. There will be days of pain or doubt. But I pray that today would be a day where we can experience new faith and new hope and new love through your Spirit because of you, Jesus Christ. I thank you, Jesus, in your name. Amen.